This tutorial, called A Beautiful Plot and Theme, is a virtual class that shows you a short film that's 10 minutes, followed by a discussion with actual students about plot and theme. The story is called The Most Beautiful Thing. It's a short film by Cameron Covell. It's 10 minutes. Watch that film, grab a notepad, and then get ready to participate virtually in the discussion with the students who actually did the film with me. And then you will know more about plot and theme. Plot is what happens in the story. Theme is what it means. Take one. All right, so first thing that I guess I will do here is put on my PowerPoint to share with you. And I want you to interrupt me at any time. Is it big enough?
Mm-hmm.
Do you recognize your pictures?
No.
Not at all.
Oh, wow.
Oh my
The
God.
title of the film, The Most Beautiful Thing. And the main characters are Brandon and Emily. And what we're looking at today is plot mainly, but we need to understand plot to lead us to theme. So plot, when you talk to someone after a movie, they say, you know, she came in and then they went there and then that happened and that happened and that happened. That is plot. It's just what happened. But what does it mean to us? And that's what we're mostly interested in. That's theme. But we need to have a basic understanding of the short story terms before we can get to the theme. Theme is complex. It's probably one of the most difficult concepts, but it is the most important. And just like with a short story, this short film comes down to one primary message that the whole story builds and creates. Okay, so what we're going to look at here is, this is called the short story plot diagram. So basically, you get a bit of information, something happens, there's problems and interesting weird things happen, and then there's a hint about how the end might come. That is the climax. The climax is the peak. But you'll see this is a long time to get here, and this is a short time to get here. So our primary interest is before the climax. And after the climax, we just sort out the details and conclude. So that's what we're going to do using A Beautiful Thing. And that is just the plot. And once we've got a bit of an overview of that, then we'll look at theme. Does that make sense so far?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Here we go. That's the diagram that I just showed you on the board. So what do you think exposition is?
The start.
Anything else?
Exposition. The beginning, the start, I don't know, the setup before they start moving.
Yeah, exactly. All of that. So it's the background information that we get before the story really starts.
Okay.
And I've drawn in this little diagram here to show initial incident, because it often is missed, but something has to happen to make the story start, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't just go. And so what you do is you get a bit of background information, and then something happens and it launches the story, the rising action. So what is the exposition that we get in this film? It's very little.
Yeah.
It's just a kid walking around being in school.
Yeah. So it's great. It's a high school.
On his own.
Okay, let me just say this at the beginning. So at the very beginning, when he goes to his locker, he sees something about prom, but he's not really sure about it. So what he does is he goes into his locker, puts it in the poster in his locker, and grabs the binder.
All we really know at the very beginning is it's grade 12, it's a high school, and it's nearing the end of the year because the prom is coming. That's it.
Yeah.
And then something happens to start the whole story in motion, and it's what you said, the poster. the prom. The idea of the prom, the decision to get a date for the prom is the first event.
Special incident. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that makes sense, doesn't it? Because the whole story then builds from that one incident. Okay, so rising action, I mean, it's a beautiful word, isn't it? It describes exactly what it is. So you're moving from the beginning of the story into some kind of conflict and problem. Now, you're watching any movie or reading any story, this is where the bulk of the story is. And the most important component of the rising action, conflict. As I always like to tell my husband, conflict makes the world go round. Conflict. Human versus human,
Right.
human versus self, and human versus the environment. So in here is where we have our problems, things go wrong, people are insecure, all that sort of stuff happens here. But how do we know what would be the climax?
I'm guessing he just goes out and then he sees this girl sitting on the bench and then they start talking. That's the climax. Something is happening.
No.
And it's the big problem right there.
Nope. It is the problem. That's what I'm guessing. But it's not the climax. It's a turning point. So we have all the problems, everything's going wrong, the bully's there, the girl can't hear, he doesn't know that, he's upset, he's insecure, nobody likes him, and so on. All of that is happening here. What might we hope happens?
He goes to prom with her, that's
guess. Right, that's what we're hoping for, right?
Yeah.
And what is our first real hint that that is actually going to happen? In order to know, we need to know what the story is actually about. And the story is about a protagonist who is the main character. And the main character, who is the protagonist, has to have a problem to solve or a goal to reach. Has to have one or the other. So Brandon has a goal to reach. What is it?
To get a date.
To get a date for the prom. And when is our first solid hint about how it might turn out?
I was talking to Emily?
No, it's a specific, very specific moment.
When she runs to him?
Yes. When she starts talking. When she starts talking is enough. Because you know they're going to bridge the gap. So that's it. Now, it's not as exciting as you might think a climax should be, but in terms of short story theory, it's the turn in the action. And that's why it sits at the top of the short story theory. And so we've gone from all these problems here and, oh, it doesn't look good. They don't understand each other. It looks like she's with the other guy. He misses the cues. But then when he accidentally bumps into her and walks away from her, she speaks. And that right there shows, her desire to connect with him. And we don't know for sure that she'll say yes, but it sure looks good.
Right.
And so then the falling action just becomes what happens after that, which in this story, this film, is very little. She runs to him, they embrace. Of course, she's going to the prom. It all works out happily, right? Yeah. So the very ending act of the story is the final conclusion or the resolution, and that is that all is well. So that's just absolutely bare bones plot. Now I've broken it into parts for you just to run over the terms a little bit better. Exposition is background information. It's usually who's there, what's going on, where are they? Because that sets us an understanding of what we're talking about. And then some event happens. So initial incident looks like a scary English term, but it isn't. It means first event.
Right.
That's all it is, first event. Then the rising action is straight up to the climax, And you can think of different kinds of conflict that are going to be there. There are several different kinds of conflict, but there are three primary ones that are typically addressed. The first one is human versus human. So conflict is, I always think of it like boxing. And if you have that image for yourself, conflict is a collision, right? It's unhappiness. It's two sides going against each other. So if it's human versus human conflict, what would that be in a beautiful thing?
That would be, he wants her to try to speak, but she won't do it.
And so what kinds of conflict are there? There's more than one.
Well, that's the one. He tries to speak, she won't do it.
No, I just mean the name. So that identifying of that is it's her versus him, because she's asking him to speak and she doesn't want to. But for Brandon alone, it's insecurity and feeling sad and anxious about upsetting her. So then that's human versus self. And Emily is anxious, and she too is anxious and upset, and that is her versus herself. So that identifies the two, right? Human versus human, human versus self. Anything else there in there?
Human versus, well, they both had that conflict, so that was two.
Yeah. But I mean a third kind.
And then the third kind
of conflict.
Jeez, you see a lot in the whole story.
So there's three main kinds: human versus human, human versus self, and human versus the environment.
The environment.
And the environment it can mean the climate, but it can also mean the context. A high school environment is horrid, right?
Oh.
When he walks through there and he's alienated and by himself and feeling isolated and people bump into him and ignore him, that whole climate is a conflict for them. Both of them, they both don't fit in.
Right.
So they have conflict with the high school environment as well.
Right.
Then, of course, the other big man versus man conflict is the bully, right?
Oh,
yeah.
But I think Brandon goes through a ton of human versus self conflict, right? He wants to be popular. He wants to get a date. He wants to look good. He wants to be like the others. He wants her to like him. It's just so much insecurity as a conflict there. So that's why that takes us all the way up to the top. And those are the three different kinds of conflict. Okay, how are we doing? Any questions so far?
Wow.
Okay, so climax, I want you always to think of the climax as the turning point. Because we have a different thought about what climax means than how it's applied in the story. It is a turning point. It is a change in the action. It gives us a hint, but it doesn't tell us the outcome.
No.
And that moment before the climax, when you're like, it's all chaos and everything's going wrong, and you say he's in the bathroom and he's upset and stuff, that's crisis.
Yeah.
That emotional angst and everything comes before the climax. That is crisis. And that is the term for it. And falling action, like rising action, just means what it says. When you're doing something more complicated than this film, you know, in a novel or a drama, that there's going to be subplots. And so all of that has to be worked out in the falling action at the very end.
Okay.
So there it is. Now we're all experts on plot. And so I've just scribbled out an example for you of what I would use to fill out this plot. You don't need to copy it down, if you can if you want, but it's mainly just to illustrate to you what you need to understand. So starting here, I say, what's the setting? High school. Prom. Grade 12. Who are the main characters? Emily and Brandon. Initial incident, the prom poster. Rising action events, Brendan makes an effort to get a date. He's a lonely guy. He tries to talk with others, but no luck. He meets Emily and has a starting romance. Then the bully shows up, and he has no prom date, and he's in despair. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So isn't that the whole story practically, except the very ending parts, which is the climax and the resolution. So the turning point here is really that moment when they bump into each other, he turns to leave, and she is brave enough to vocalize, which is a huge brave act by someone who's hearing impaired or deaf. It's very frightening and also very difficult to do. So she's bold enough to do it. We know how significant that would be. It is a change in the action. And then just to ravel out what happens next, he asks her to the prom, they embrace, it's a happy ending, he reached his goal. So now we understand the story really well, don't we? Like, it's pretty a basic kind of falling in love story with a twist or two. So that's what it looks like overall. But then, what's it mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What does it mean?
That's theme. So theme is an insight into people or relationships or life that is revealed by a story. And what you want to say kind of is, oh, what lesson did you learn? But it's not a lesson. It's an understanding. But very briefly, as I mentioned, plot is what happened. Theme is what it means. So we look at this story of Brendan and Emily and how they were, what happened, and how it worked out. And that will sort of suggest something about life that isn't just in the film, but is true in life. And so that's kind of what you're looking for. And there's more than one right answer. But there are wrong answers, and there are lesser answers. So what you want to do is try to use some of the plot knowledge that you have to help you figure out the theme. Which one of these do you think is the theme?
Oh.
Oh my gosh.
Would it be love?
I'd say love.
Yeah, I would go with that too. Like that would be mine. Right.
What does it mean, love? What does that mean?
Oh my God.
It's an emotion. It's like describing the theme. Just saying love isn't great.
Well, no,
So
it's the theme to me is love, because it's an expression that he is expressing towards the girl he just met, and he has feelings for her, and we could see that.
That one word says that?
No, there's a lot more than that.
No, that's all you get. That's all you get. One word. Is that the theme?
Yeah, the one word, because there's a lot of mixed emotions there.
No.
About it.
No.
Well, that's my guess. So
a theme is an insight. It has to be a complete idea. One word isn't a complete idea. Love is dangerous. Love is wonderful. Love is something everyone should experience. But love, one word, is not a theme. And that is why I put it there like that for you, because you can't assume that someone else knows what you're thinking when you only write down one word. And we tend to do that. The theme is parenthood. The theme is love. The theme is cruelty. The theme is this. It's not. That's one word. You need to say something about it, right? How about these?
Taking a risk can lead to wonderful results. Must be.
That's the best of the lot. What about the others?
Well, I think
They're good too.
You like
They're
to?
okay. Yeah, I mean, being a bully is wrong is really taking a teeny little bit of the story, so it'd be hard to discuss it. So it would be like a sub-theme, right? Whereas misunderstandings can be overcome as possible, but taking a risk can lead to wonderful events actually is what happened. right? He took a risk, he stepped outside of his comfort zone, and it worked out in the end. So then if you were asked to write about a thematic paragraph about a piece of literature, then you need to figure out the theme before you start writing. And the way that you figure out the theme is?
It's the storyline.
Sure, the plot helps you. Okay, I mentioned this, and that's why I asked you, because now I want you to remember. 3 things: the protagonist, the conflict, and the resolution. The main character, Brandon, the main conflict, he's isolated and he wants to get to know someone else personally, and the conflict resolution is he does it. And that's where we get the positive turn from. So the main character has a goal. His goal is to get a prom date. His problem is he's awkward, he doesn't know girls, he doesn't know how to socialize, so he purposefully tries really hard, practices smiling, practices in the mirror, and overcomes his shyness, and he gets the girl. So those 3 are kind of your best hints towards the theme. Who's the main character? What's the main problem? How is it solved?
And just to recap for theme here, is there are basically 3 questions you can ask yourself as a kind of recipe for finding the answer. And these are: who's the main character or protagonist? Remember, the protagonist has a goal to reach or a problem to solve. What is the main conflict in the story for the protagonist? And how does that conflict resolve? So if we look at our wonderful, most beautiful thing, we find Brandon is the main character or protagonist. His conflict is that he's shy and insecure and wants a date for the prom, and he overcomes his shyness and does get a date. When we look at the whole story as a whole and we say, what message about life or people or what understanding can we gain from looking at this experience with Brendan and Emily? We can say taking a risk can lead to wonderful results. And our proof is that he takes a risk, talks to people, and he finally gets a date and gets what he wants. Or we can say misunderstandings can be overcome. This would also work with the same film because she is hearing impaired and he doesn't know that. And so they have to work over some misunderstandings about that. And further, then when the other guy intrudes upon their happiness, they work through that. So that's the kind of best recipe I can give you. And I want to just thank you very much for sharing this video with me. And I think most of you know who else has been here throughout the process, and that is my wonderful kitty cat, Stripe, has been here to help me. Thank you very much. And that's that for this tutorial on plot and theme. Thank you.